One conversation can change everything. Arabs have been traversing the Indian Ocean and traveling to the east coast of Africa to trade for thousands of years. They would ride up and down the coasts in these little wooden boats called dhows in search of gold, ivory, slaves, and spices. The spice trade became so valuable that in 1840, the Sultan of Oman attacked a bunch of Portuguese settlements off the coast of Tanzania and moved the capital of his empire from Muscat, Oman, to Stone Town on the island of Zanzibar. Now, Zanzibar is a gorgeous island. It has white sand beaches, and so you can't blame the guy for wanting to move from the middle of the desert to an oceanfront paradise. But the real reason that he moved there was because the soil was so fertile that he was able to create these massive clove plantations. And those clove plantations made him an extremely wealthy man. And it gave Zanzibar it gave Zanzibar the nickname of the Spice Island. In May of 2015, my wife and I hopped on a little 2-engine prop plane like this one in Nairobi, Kenya, and took a flight to Zanzibar and spent about a week on the island. We traveled around Stone Town and we saw all their beautiful wood-carved doors. They have some of the most gorgeous, intricately carved wooden doors that you've ever seen. And some of them have been there for hundreds of years. We went and we visited the spice fields, and we were able to see cinnamon trees. It's kind of crazy. They literally carve the bark off, and that's how you get your cinnamon sticks. And we went and saw the peppercorns growing on peppercorn vines, and it's crazy to see those spices in real life and see where your food comes from. And then we were able to visit the historic Emerson on Harumsey tea house and have this crazy dinner there where you're watching the sunset over the top of this town. And the interesting thing about Stone Town is that it's this crazy mix of cultures, and so you're seeing sights and sounds that you've never seen before. We wrapped up our stay by staying in the Residence Zanzibar. Now, the Residence isn't your typical resort. It's this luxury island resort where you've got hundreds of acres of gardens, and you don't stay in hotel rooms at the Residence. They literally have these multi-room private villas that you stay in with a private pool off the back. And my wife and I had done a lot of traveling at this point in our life already, and we'd been married for a few years, and our typical stay was in places like hostels and cheap Airbnbs. So when we had workers bringing us fresh coconuts to our private pool, we're like, what in the world? What are we doing here? How did we get here? And we felt like a king and a queen. Now, on the last night of our stay, there was this gorgeous pink ombre sky, and you could smell the seaweed coming off the ocean as there was this breeze. And we had run into this former CEO of a Fortune 500 company there named John. Now, John invited my wife Megan and I to join he and his family at the end of this. This is called the Jetty, and they had us come for this private wine tasting with them. And I swear that the bottle of wine that we drank with them, it probably cost more than our entire week in Zanzibar. And so John and his family, they start telling us about this, their epic vacation that they've been on. They went diving with the sharks in South Africa, and they'd gone on this luxury safari in Tanzania, and then they were wrapping up their time at the Residence. So then, at one point during the conversation, John turns to me and he asks us about our time in Africa. So my wife and I had been there for about a month, and even though we skipped the detail about the hotel that we had been staying in for most of our time, $10 a night hotel, they still got the impression that we weren't the typical visitor to a place like the Residence. So John then turns to me and he says, man, how did you guys get here? What are you doing at the residence? And he was super nice about it, but he was kind of like, what in the world? And so what was a 25-year-old, essentially broke chimney sweep from Cincinnati doing hobnobbing and brushing shoulders with Fortune 500 CEOs and Russian oligarchs 7,000 miles away from home? Believe it or not, it all started from one conversation. So a few weeks before, my wife and I had sent an email to the head of sales and partnerships at the residence named Francois. And we offered to do 30 days worth of social content, so photos and videos, in exchange for a 3-night stay. And we thought it was a pretty good deal on our end because it was $1,500 a night to stay at this place at that point in time. And so when Francois reached back out and he said, yes, we'd love to have you come, but there's one stipulation. You guys need to pay the $50 a night service fee, and then you can come. And we were like, okay, I think we can manage that. We'll make it happen. And that one interaction, that one conversation completely changed my life. So on the trip home, I turned to my wife and I said, okay, I hate sweeping chimneys. It's a terrible, dirty job. I'm ready to do something different. And if we could get a stay at a place like the residence in exchange for social content, maybe we could get local businesses in Cincinnati to pay us to create content for them. So I got home, I quit my job, and I've been creating content for a living ever since. And so at this point, you might all be asking, okay, well, what does Zanzibar and Russian oligarchs and sultans have to do with selling through social? So today I'm going to share with you these 3 mindsets that you need to have to sell through social effectively. And so we reached out to Francois. The reason that he responded back to us was because we were offering something that was extremely valuable to him. From his perspective, he was getting more in value than he was giving in payment. And the focus was on him and what he was going to get out of it and that value. And so that mindset number 1 is, it's not about you. And something that Cynthia and Jalen both talked about was this idea of having conversations and conversing with people. So whether you're in B2B or B2C, that idea of treating social in a way where you're able to have interactions with people is extremely powerful. So I'm a B2B guy. I've worked at engineering software companies and companies that are selling usually really technical either software or consulting services. Do I have any other B2B people in the room? Anybody else? And then, this also applies. So this conversation is definitely focused on how do you sell, specifically through a platform like LinkedIn. And even if you're in B2C, if you want to do any kind of consulting, if you think about starting a business of your own, then you have to figure out a way to sell. It's not really good enough if you have a great product. It really matters to be able to actually sell what you're doing. So most people, especially in B2B, think of social as a megaphone. It's a way for you to be able to talk about your ideas and talk about yourself, talk about your products and services. And if you go to a typical B2B website or B2B social page like, oh my gosh, LinkedIn, it's all about the company. It's about their products and services, what they do. And so hearing some of our B2C folks talking about audience engagement, you don't typically see that in the B2B world. And the problem with that is that the market doesn't care. Your ideal customers, they don't care about you. They don't care about your products. They don't care about your services. They don't care about your point of view, and they don't care about your why. Your ideal customers care about themselves. They care about their pain points, their problems, their hopes, dreams, desires, and goals. And the more that you're able to focus on what's important to them, the further you're going to get. And the better connection that you're going to build with people so that you're not constantly pitch slapping them by cold calling them in the middle of dinner or sending them a cold DM. And if you ask Chris Rock, nobody likes getting slapped in the face, and that's pretty much how it feels when you're getting interrupted to get pitched for a product that you weren't looking to buy. And so an example of that, this is a perfect example, and there's much more atrocious ones, but this is just one I got this week, where this guy reaches out, he's connected with me, and then it's the classic on LinkedIn connect and pitch, where he connects with me. 5 minutes after I accept a connection, he goes, "Hey, I have an awesome software, you should buy it." And I didn't respond. So he totally lost the opportunity to have a conversation or interact with me. And I think the real secret of social is that it's really more of a conversation. This is about networking and building relationships with people. And so making this mindset switch from how do I talk about my product as much as possible and push it to how can I have as many conversations as I possibly can with the right people. And the amazing thing about a platform like LinkedIn is that it's a giant networking event. Only instead of going to that event and hoping that the right people are there, you're able to, especially if you use Sales Navigator, pick exactly who the people are that you want to know, and you're able to have conversations with them. So your content and your outreach must focus on them. It has to focus on your customer, not your products and services. So I'm not going to get super tactical. I tend to be a very tactical person. And so as soon as I get tactical, we're going to be here for way too long. But I do want to give you these 3 types of content that will help you create conversations with your customers. So the first one is to create content with your future customers. The second type of content that you need to create to start conversations is content for your future customers. And the third type of content is content that makes it easier to buy. And as far as where you should focus your attention, for me personally, it's going to be primarily on that content with future customers, and then the content that makes it easier to buy, it's just like a little sprinkle on the top. You do need it. It's extremely important for people to know what you do, but most companies focus almost all their attention there, and nobody wants to listen. All right, so fast forward 6 years, I went with my family to Disney World, and after we had our fill of magic carpets and flying elephants, and my wife is 6 months pregnant, so we definitely had our fill of standing in line in the hot sun with screaming kids, I did what our parents always told us not to do. I hopped in the car with a stranger I met from the internet. Now, thankfully, that stranger wasn't a serial killer. He was actually James Carberry, the founder of Sweetfish Media. So James and I had been having a conversation on LinkedIn for a little while, and I told him I was headed to Orlando, where he was based out of, and he came and picked me up at my hotel, bought me breakfast, and he shared something that has totally changed my career. He talked to me about the idea of content-based networking. And it's really just this idea that your relationships will change your life. Conversations will change your life. Why not pick the people that you want to talk to, and then instead of talking about yourself, let them talk about themselves and share their ideas. And you can build really high-quality relationships with amazing people who will change your life. So that led to me starting the Strategic Marketer podcast, where I interviewed lots of marketing leaders and ultimately ended up landing my previous role. So I worked at Proofpoint Marketing, and I almost doubled my salary and started working with $30 to $100 million organizations, teaching them how to sell through social, through LinkedIn, and podcasts and live shows and things like that. It's amazing how one conversation can change everything. And that leads us to mindset number 2, which is to create content with the people you want to know. If there is a hack in the marketing world, I'm not really a big hack guy. I'm kind of like the anti-hack guy. I don't like using automation. If I send you a message, it's actually from me. I'm not, if I'm going to do cold outreach to somebody to invite them on a show, it's going to be from me personally, not from an AI bot. But this idea of creating content with the people you want to know is a complete hack. And so be a catalyst for other people's ideas. And the idea is, instead of talking about yourself, you're giving people a platform to share their ideas. Now, a lot of people who are embracing this idea through like account-based marketing or something like that, it's almost always focused on a future customer, like a prospect. How can we have a prospect on with us? But where I've seen the most amazing results come are not from having prospects on, which you should, it's awesome, but it's building relationships with industry influencers, or I kind of like to call them super connectors, the people who are really well connected in your space, and partners. And those are the people who are going to end up making intros for you, and that's how you scale warm referrals and relationships, is by building relationships with people like that. Now, please, 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 for the love of LinkedIn, don't use this as a veiled sales pitch. If you're going to have somebody on a show and then you're immediately going to try to pitch them their product after you're done, then you might as well just cold call them or send a DM and save everybody a bunch of time. Where this really works is when you look to build a relationship with that person and add value. And you're thinking, how can I make this person look awesome? What can I do for them, and how can I connect them? How can I serve them? And if you get on every call that way, then those people want to connect you with people who are ready to buy right now. And so why does this work? It works insanely well because people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about their ideas, and they love to share their expertise. Matthew, shout out to Matthew. I'm here because I reached out to Matthew in 2017 and asked him to coffee so I could learn from him. And, now I'm here today. And he got me here because he gave me an opportunity to share. So I'm in. And when you're the person who gives somebody else a platform to share their ideas, they'll love you for it. And they'll want to connect you with other people who they know. And so at this point, a lot of people are asking me, okay, well, this sounds like long-term. This is brand awareness and brand building and, future pipeline building. And that's true. This will build your future pipeline. It'll build your medium-term pipeline. But when you talk to people who are in market right now, who are they more likely to buy from? The person who cold called them and interrupted them during dinner, or the person that had them on a show and made them look awesome to their team? One of my clients closed a $700,000 deal selling an extremely technical radar product from his first LinkedIn Live that he did. This prospect had gone dark, and he'd been emailing him for a while and wasn't able to get a hold of the guy at all. And he saw this guy present and reached out to him shortly after and said, hey, I heard you present on this topic. I'd love to have you on a LinkedIn Live to share your expertise. 5 minutes later, the guy responds back and says, yeah, I'd love to come on your show. And then a week after that, the guy said, oh, I just happen to have $500,000 that opened up in my budget. I'm going to connect you with my purchasing lady, and she's going to make this deal happen. And so a deal that normally takes 6 to 18 months to close, they closed in a couple weeks, closed half of his quota in his first year in this new job, and ended up turning into another $200,000 in business within that first year. And so this isn't just long-term pipeline. You can really close deals quickly. Have any of you ever heard somebody say the phrase know, like, and trust? People need to know, like, and trust you. So that phrase actually came from this awesome gentleman right here, Bob Berg. He's a Hall of Fame speaker and best-selling author of the book, The Go-Giver. And I had the privilege of interviewing Bob on a show that I was hosting not that long ago. And Bob is one of these people who I would call a super connector. He's one of these guys who is always looking for a way to add value to his audience by connecting people. And so the reason I had Bob on the show wasn't because I thought that Bob would become a customer for the company I was working for. It's because people who pay attention to Bob are the people who I was selling to. And so by having Bob on, not only do I get credibility by association, he also is sharing the exact same ideas that we are, so he's kind of sharing that same similar point of view. But then also there's opportunity to end up getting connected with people in his network. And so after the show was done, Bob turns to me and he's like, Joe, you've got to meet my marketing lady, Kim. You're going to love her. So Bob introduces me to Kim. And Kim, I really just launched my business not that long ago because I wrapped up my time at Proofpoint. So from the time I interviewed Bob to where I'm talking to Kim is about 2 weeks. I met Bob this one time. He introduces me to Kim. I have one conversation with Kim, tell her what I'm working on, and she goes, man, I love this idea. I could really use this for myself, but I actually think that Bob would really benefit from doing LinkedIn Lives as well. And so 1 week later, we have a conversation about what does this look like, and then the next week, she had already paid an invoice, and we were working together. So in less than a month of launching this business, I talked to somebody for one time, they introduced somebody else who becomes my second paying client in this business. And then Kim is also a super connector. So she's out there right now looking for opportunities to try to get other people to work with me. So that brings us to mindset number 3, which is really focusing on generating conversations. So when we're talking about marketing and sales, especially in the B2B world, everybody has this myopic focus on leads. I need more leads. I need more leads. If my sales team only had more leads. But where do your best customers come from? All right, if anybody in the audience, where do your best customers typically come from? The ones that stay the longest? Relationships and referrals. And yet when we go to scale our business, we focus on the type of customers that produce the worst results, the worst kind of customers. They churn the fastest because we don't think relationships and referrals can scale. And so instead of doing the non-scalable things of building relationships that will pay dividends forever, we focus on trying to scale up this thing that builds a business that nobody wants to be a part of. Leads may get you a deal, but one conversation can change everything. And so if you think of all these individual dots as individual leads, you have to do a certain amount of work to land each one of these leads. Let's say to get a really good quality lead, you need to make 200 cold calls. Or you need to get a certain amount of ebook downloads or put a certain amount of paid dollars. If that lead doesn't turn into a customer, that money is gone. You didn't get any value from what you put in. Because that lead isn't going to do anything to impact another lead. At least, generally speaking, you're not really going to see that happen. And the thing is that pipeline generation is a never-ending game. If you slow down on for all the small business owners out there, the thing that I hear is, okay, I do pipeline generation, I'm focusing on sales, then I get a project, and it stops for 3 months. And you know what happens when you stop for 3 months? Your pipeline stops. So then you finish that project, and you have nothing left at the end to get that next business. So that's where you get that feast or famine. So you have to find a way to, you have to find a business development process that's more sustainable, something that you can do week in and week out, something that you and your team actually enjoy. There's some maybe slightly psychopathic people out there that love making cold calls, but most people hate it. Most small business owners hate doing that. So let's find something that's more sustainable. Have you ever gotten a referral from a cold call? I'm just imagining this scenario where I get a cold call during dinner, and it's like, yeah, Frank, I don't need your product at all, but thank you for interrupting me during dinner. You know what? There's a CEO of a $30 million company here locally that's a friend of mine. I'm going to give you his cell phone number because I'm sure he'd love for you to interrupt him during dinner and then hound him for the next 6 months too. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever said that. And yeah, I'm sure you're going to have a salesperson who's going to go, I got one referral from the cold call. Okay, cool. You get your one every 10 years, but that's not a normal process. So when you focus on conversations instead of leads, you're going to start to have this happen, where you have a conversation with somebody one time, and they're going to know, like, and trust you because you made them look awesome on a show. And then they might not need what you have, but they have friends that do. They have customers that do. And they're going to start to introduce you to other people in their network. And then once you've done this for a couple months, like 2, 3, 4 months of really focusing on building and generating conversations, you're going to start to have this happen. And this is how you scale relationships and referrals. You start building relationships with people that are outside of your normal network. So you give me a list of 200 or 300 people in Sales Navigator, and I'm going to be able to get you LinkedIn Lives or podcast recordings or something like that, where you create content with that person. Now, that lets you get completely outside of your normal network. And so for me personally, I have a network in Nashville where I built a bunch of relationships with people. And then there's this group of people in Minneapolis that I built relationships with, and people locally here in Cincinnati. And then now you've got the Bob Berg, Kim, Go-Giver community that I've started to build relationships with. And so I've had it happen twice this month, where I got on a discovery call with somebody that I'd had a warm introduction to. And I get on the call, and they're telling me, name-dropping all the other people that we mutually know that I've never met in person. But I've interviewed some of their favorite peers or favorite colleagues on a show, and so then they feel like they know me. And we're getting on this call, and they feel like we have a long-standing relationship because we know all the same people. And, again, making a cold call to that person or having them fill out a form and getting on that call is a totally different experience than having somebody get on a call and saying, oh my goodness, the background looks exactly the same as it does on your LinkedIn Live. This is crazy. It's fun to see you in person. All right, so to wrap it up, there are 3 activities that generate conversations. I've spent a lot of time working with B2B companies, and a lot of things that are done don't actually lead to anything that's measurable or scalable. And these are the 3 activities that if you do these regularly, as in if you do at least a little bit of each one of these 3 activities every single week, you will start generating pipeline within a few weeks. Definitely within 90 days, you're going to start generating pipeline. So the first one is to create content. But it's not just any content, it's the 3 types that we talked about. So you've got content with people you want to know, content for your ideal customers, and content that makes it easier to buy. And then joining into conversations that are already happening, so that could be coming to in-person events like this one, or commenting on LinkedIn or things like that. And then finally, initiating one-on-one conversations with people. So really the goal is, how do you scale this up? So over the last few weeks since I've started this business, I'm talking to between 5 and 10 people a week, that most of them have come in from warm introductions. And so you're really looking to scale that up. All right, so if you want to sell without selling your soul, remember, it's not about you. Create content with the people you want to know, and focus on content that generates conversations with the right people. Because one conversation can change everything.